hunt
Cool.
down some people.
Have fun. Hope the finding people is easy.
Yep. Okay. You are live on YouTube.
Grazie mille.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, and I'm going to mute myself so that you
Cool.
don't have to hear any background stuff, but I will unmute as needed.
Do you want me to ask you to say hi, or do you?
Whatever
would you
you'd
prefer
like.
I usually ask them to say hi. So.
Okay, I will say hi.
Yay. Thanks. Thanks. All right. Okay. All right. I am clicking Start Webinar now. All right, everyone, we're going to give it just about a minute or two to let everyone hop on. Once I see that, for the most part, people are online, we'll get started. Okay, we're just going to give it one more minute and then we'll get started. Okay, all right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Cricut Machine Overview with Plano Public Library. My name is Caitlin Tips, and I am a Public Services Librarian Senior, and I will be presenting today's program. I'm assisted by Meredith Del Monte, who will be monitoring the chat for any questions. Please say hi, Meredith.
Hello, everyone.
All right. Before we begin, I need to let you know about some ground rules that we've set up for today's program. You will be muted during this class, and we have your video blocked. You will only see the instructor's screen. At the top of your screen, you can find an exit full screen option if you need to get to other things on your computer. You are welcome to ask questions or request that the instructor repeat information at any time during today's program. You should see an icon at the bottom of your screen that says chat. Click on that to open the chat window. Chat is set to be seen by library staff only. If you prefer, you may also use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of your screen to ask questions. Please note that any inappropriate questions or comments will cause your immediate removal from today's class. For all questions, we may answer you directly in the chat or Q&A box. Hold the question until a break or the end of class, or we will answer it immediately. On our website, you can also find links for future classes related to today's program. We will also share related links or information in the chat. We will be using the instructor's screen to demonstrate and share any additional resources in chat as well. And if you need to leave at any time today, a recording of today's program will be available in a few days. So if you would just like to rewatch today's program at a later time, that is an option. So with that out of the way, let's get started. This is today's program agenda. We will be covering an in-depth look into Cricut machines, their accessories, potential uses, and more. If there was any confusion on how to pronounce Cricut, it is indeed said just like the bug, which is why earlier versions of the company's logo, as seen here on the screen, was a C with antennas like a cricket. So it isn't Cri-cut, it is Cricut. All right. So let's start with, what is a Cricut? A Cricut machine is an electronic smart cutting machine that is programmed to cut, draw, or personalize material under 3 millimeters of thickness with vector-based designs. It is also known as a cutting plotter, smart die cut machine, and even an automatic cutting machine. It was first introduced by Provo Craft in 2005 with their very first Cricut CRV001 personal machine that was later upgraded to the Expression model that same year. Since then, there have been 6 new models introduced in their product lineup that are capable of cutting, drawing, embossing, debossing, and more, expanding their capability to cutting over 300 plus materials, which is pretty nifty. All right. So what kind of machines are currently on the market? So Cricut currently has 3 types of cutting machines on the market. They have the Cricut Joy, which is their smallest portable cutting machine capable of matless smart cutting. It is not capable of cutting the same material as the Maker, however, as it does not have a smart housing device. Then there is the Cricut Explorer, which is the next size up in the series. And the Cricut Explorer series is currently on model number 3, having had 2 previous iterations. The machine used to come with a smart dial with material selections all set on the machine. This has disappeared with the current model, as material selection is now exclusively done in the Design Space software. It also does not come with smart housing as an option. And then the third model is the Cricut Maker. It is the most expansive model with the capability of cutting over 300 different types of materials. This is because it does come with that smart housing device, which is a gear that allows the machine to rotate and operate more heavy-duty blades like the rotary, knife blade, and more. We'll cover more of that in depth a little later. It currently only has 2 models in the series, despite also being on the model number 3. The chief difference between the 2 being that model 3 does allow for that matless cutting and usage of smart material. So before we leave this page, I do want to go over some of the other brands on the market for smart cutting machines. And these do include Silhouette, Brother, and Sizzix. Silhouette is probably the most well-known. They are the creator of the Cameo. But what I will say is that even though these other brands are known for other things, they're not as quite niche in the crafting market as Cricut. So as you can see below the main 3 Cricut cutting machines, I've also included other tools that Cricut has marketed. And this does include offering things for lighting and heat presses. So they have really expanded their machine offerings in a multitude of different directions, including 5 different heat presses for smart ironing, 3 different lighting options for material weeding, along with other accessories. So just to touch on those briefly, for lighting, they have the Cricut Bright Pad, which is literally, it looks like a smart tablet that just has a display screen of light. And this is so you can put your project weeding on top and see cut lines more clearly to weed material, extra material off of your designs. And then they have also put out the Cricut Bright 360, which comes in 2 sizes, the table lamp and floor lamp size, which just allows you to have a better, very clear overhead lighting for your projects. Then, as I mentioned before, they have the Cricut heat machines, and there are 5 different offerings for that, and it's a variety of sizes. So the Cricut Auto Press, which is an industrial standard of t-shirt pressing, it's a larger area and is marketed as being very easy to slide t-shirts on and off, for instance. Then there is the Cricut Easy Press 1, 2, and 3. The 1 is no longer in production, but you can still get models 2 and 3. And those are just the larger square ironing pads, really. Then they also have the Cricut Hat Press, which is just a miniature version of the Easy Press that has a slight curve to it to be used on the front of hats, like baseball hats, or sometimes shoes. And finally, they have the Cricut Mug Press, which is a heated sublimation press for mugs. Currently, only mugs, not tumblers, but who knows what direction they may take that. So any questions just over types of machines at this moment before I move on?
We don't have a question about type of machines. We do have a question about materials that the Cricut can cut.
That's a great question. It's going to depend on the model, and I'll cover that a little bit more later, but it's going to depend on the model of machine that you get, the type of blade that your machine is capable of using, and that you select to use or add on. I will say, if you are looking at the maker model, it can cut anything under 3 millimeters of thickness, which can range from paper, vinyl, fabric, chipboard, cardstock, even some leather, and even balsa wood. So again, I'll talk more about that a little bit later, but hopefully that kind of scratches the surface of your question for now.
Yeah, the main interest is plastics.
So it can do plastic, it can do like thin acetate. If you're looking at like a thick plastic, I would actually recommend looking at laser cutters for that, or even CNC machines. But if it's just a thin plastic sheeting, it can totally do that. It can even score it. But again, I'll get a little bit more into that later. But thank you for asking. Okay, moving on. I do want to go over some software requirements before we jump too much further into the machine overview. And just because I want to make sure I mention that Cricut machines do require usage of the Design Space software application. It is a free download available from Cricut.com or your app store on a mobile device, and does require registration for a free Cricut ID account. It is available on Windows operating systems, Mac operating systems, as well as Android and Apple devices. I will not be covering how to use Design Space in today's class, but in 2 weeks on June 29th, I will be covering Design Space Basics, and you can pre-register for that online through the library website. The same way that you found this class. Yay. All right. So machine overview. So this is an overview of the physical machine, each component, use of features, etc. So what we have here is the maker model. I am only doing the maker model for today's class because features on this between the Joy and the Explorer are fairly similar. And regardless of what model, the only difference between the 3 is that this one does have the quick swap tool for that for the adaptive tool system. All right, so we have here at the top this sort of indentation on the machine, and that is called the top slot. And that is where you can have your iPad, your phone, or any kind of mobile device sitting if you are running your Cricut machine cutting off of a mobile device. So it's really nice. You can just set it there and walk away if you need to, and it will still be connected to the machine and cut your project. On the back of the machine is where you will find the power connection, as well as where you would plug in the cord to connect to a PC or your Mac. So while this machine does have Bluetooth connection capabilities, that's how you would connect wirelessly from your phone or a tablet. If you're having issues with Bluetooth, you can plug this machine directly into your PC device. Over here on the right, on the front, we do have our power buttons for turning on and off the machine. I'll cover more of the buttons in the next slide, just because it'll have a better picture. Below that on the side, you have a USB port. So if you are cutting off of your phone or a tablet and it's low on battery, you can actually just take the cord and plug it in to the side of your Cricut machine. That way you're not trying to stretch it and connect it to an outlet. It's a nice feature there. Now here on the bottom, that's your bottom compartment, and this is where you can store some extra accessories that you're not using with your current project. It is where you can store pins or weeding tools or extra blades. There's a magnetic compartment where you can actually have extra cutting blades there for replacement. And you don't have to worry about it just sliding all over the place, so it's really nice and organized. Now, this is pointing to clamp B. These are labeled, so you may not be able to make it out, but here where I'm hovering my mouse over actually says B, and that is your blade housing. The Cricut model behind this top quick swap blade here actually has a gold gear, and I'll cover that a little bit more a little later, but it is unique to this model. And directly next to it, you have clamp A, which is your pin housing or other tool housing. So both of these just pop open. Clamp B opens completely to where you just can pull that blade in and out. Clamp A loosens this adapter holder right here so you can snap a pin in and out. And finally, over here, you have your storage cup. So this is where you can store any weeding tools or scissors or whatever else you may need in that slot there. It's just a great use of space, just to hold some extra things. Any questions about the machine?
None at this time.
Okey-doke. Thank you so much. All right, so to continue, this is that close-up of the buttons. And this is where we have our power button right here. So that's on and off. And then you see that double arrow button right there. That is for loading a mat. So to load or unload a mat onto the Cricut machine. And I'll explain more about mats in just a moment. Then directly next to it, you have that Cricut C button. And that is your cut button or project start button. Now on the Maker Model 3 and Explorer 3, that has been updated to be a start button. So I believe it's like a triangle, just to make it a little bit more accessible. And finally, we do have that pause, press to pause cutting. So if for some reason your project is not doing as expected, you do have the ability to hit pause and unload and restart if need be. Or if you just need to pause for a moment because you have to leave the room and you don't want it to keep cutting, you can pause and come back and it should pick up exactly where you left it. All right. So Machine accessories. So the Cricut machine itself requires certain accessories to function. And I would say the mandatory accessory, depending on model, includes your blades and tools. So the Cricut machine has over 19 different kinds of blade attachments and just different tools that go with it. So I'm going to do my best to cover some of those. And again, if you have any questions at any time, please feel free to type that in the chat. I want to make sure that y'all are getting what you need out of today's class. All right, so for those 19 different kinds of blades and attachments, we actually have a premium fine point blade, which is gold. So that's this one here in the picture. And it's a standard blade. It's usable for cardstock, vinyl, and more. It's a little bit nicer than the standard one that comes with your Cricut machine. So all of them do come with a silver blade set, and that's just your standard fine point blade. So it's not the premium fine point blade. Next, you have your deep point blade, which is black in color. So all of the blades from Cricut have a different color to signify usage. So the black one is a heavy duty blade with a steeper blade angle. So it's a 60-degree blade edge versus a 45-degree. And it is useful for thicker materials like felt, thick cardstock, magnet material, and more. And then you have the bonded fabric blade, which is pink, this one pictured here. And it is meant exclusively for bonded fabrics. And what is a bonded fabric? It's a fabric with an iron-on backer. So it's meant for thicker material. So you could use that for felt as well, I would say, because it is thicker. And next, we're going to get a little bit more in depth on those quick swap tools. So this is a group of tools designed exclusively for the maker with the adaptive tool system. It features a golden gear at the top with a plunger for swapping out tips. As a special note, all of these do have plungers on them. The difference being on like the gold, silver, pink, and black is that by pushing that plunger down, you are replacing the blade within. And the adaptive tool system, when you hold that plunger down, you're merely releasing the tip. So pictured here is the rotary blade, and it's a tiny rotary wheel used for fabric and crepe or tissue paper. It should be used with a fabric grip mat as it has a slightly thicker material for rotary cutting. It should be used with projects greater in size than 3/4 of an inch. Otherwise, it could potentially gouge the mat or lessen the life of the blade. Next, we have the knife blade, which is a mini X-Acto knife is the best way to describe it. And it's usable for balsa wood, chipboard, and leather. So it's a very, very sharp blade meant for cutting those thicker materials, the materials that are going to be on the higher end of that 3mm thickness. So definitely important to know. And then there is also an engraving tip, which is used to remove material from a surface or etch into material to add flourishes, embellishments on a variety of material, including paper, leather, aluminum sheets, or even anodized aluminum to reveal silver beneath. There's also an embossing or debossing tip, which is a technique that uses pressure to create an indentation in the surface of the material. They also have a perforation blade tip, which is used to create tearable projects. Think like paper dolls or pop-out effects for books and cards. There's also a wavy blade, which is a fun way of adding like a wavy edge tall cutting for a fun whimsical cut. It's also might be known as a drag blade. So it just adds a sort of drag effect to cuts. And then there is also the scoring and double scoring wheel tip. And while it's not technically a blade, the wheel scores the paper for folding materials like cardstock or cardboard for boxes or cards that you want to make. So that's covering your blades and your tools. Are there any questions about blades?
None at this time.
Okay, cool. All right, so moving on to machine mats. So in this photo, you can see that there's 3 colored mats. This one being green, blue, and pink. There's actually one more that is purple. And these are mats that indicate a different level of glue or stickiness to hold on to project material as it runs through the machine. Now, a mat is needed for the Explorer models as well as the Maker Model 1. The Joy and Maker 3 allow for matless cutting if you're using smart material. So they are very important. I would say your green is your standard grip, and that's because it's all purpose. So it's really good for any vinyl. It's really good for general paper. I would say it's not going to be great for anything heavy duty because you will want a little bit more of a grip onto your projects. Now this blue is that light grip, and that just means it has less glue. And so what that means is you want less weighty material on that. And that really is referring to, like, if you're going to cut copy paper or a less weighted paper, you want to use this blue mat, just because what you don't want to happen is for the material to adhere to your mat to such an extent to where you tear it when you're getting your project off. So whenever you're using a cutting machine, you want to be thinking about your final output and use your accessories accordingly. And finally, there is this pink one behind it, which is that fabric grip. And I may have mentioned this earlier with the rotary blade tool, but it is exclusive for fabric usage. And that's because this mat's a little bit thicker to be a little bit more forgiving for fabric cutting. I would also use tissue paper on this one, simply because when you cut tissue paper, you may want to use that rotary tool. Now, not pictured here is a purple mat, and that is for heavy duty. It's a heavy duty grip, and it's meant for balsa wood or leather or chipboard, simply because those are thicker and you really don't want them to move when you're cutting. So anytime you're cutting that kind of material, you are going to most likely use the knife tool, and you want to be very precise with your cutting. Is there?
Yeah, Caitlin, we have a question about which accessory do you consider the best per your opinion?
I do think that depends on the project and what you want to be using the machine for. Because
and they're mainly interested in the blade and needle.
Needle. Sewing?
It does not specify. It says accessories, blade and needle both.
Okay. Well, in that regard, I would say anytime that you're going to be, well, the best blade overall, in my opinion, would be to start with standard and get the deep cut. Yeah, the deep point blade, the black one that I mentioned, simply because if you're just starting out, it's a pretty universal tool, and there's a lot of tricks to make it lasting. I don't know about best overall, because again, it does depend fully on what you intend on to be using with this machine. And the machines, again, it's not that one's better than the other. It's just about knowing what your output's going to be. or what you're hoping to create. Because if you're wanting to have more versatility with your crafting, then hands down, I would say the maker. But if you know that you just want to cut vinyl for t-shirts, then you may not need everything that the maker offers. You just might need the Explorer. Or if you know you're traveling and you just like to do crafting all the time, then the Joy may be the machine for you. And your mats do go along with that. If you know your project output, you can just stock up on different mats and you can have them preloaded and work that way. It's the same with jumping a little bit of ahead, but like if you know you want to do greeting cards, this machine, all three machines have that pin holder clamp. They have two clamps which allow for the machine to do two things within the same project, which is a really nice feature. And there's literally so many different kinds of pins on the market for you to use. Does that help? Or is there anything more I can jump into?
No, you got a thank you.
Okay, okay, good. Feel free to follow that up. I'm happy to expand on that or go down different project directions to help brainstorm what might be the best option. But looking at your pins and markers for the machine accessories, I do want to note that the pin adapter tool is size 2 Cricut brand specific pins. So the Cricut does offer a fine point pen series, normal and extra fine. They offer different gel pens, glitter pens, markers, permanent markers, watercolor markers, infusible ink pens and markers. Infusible ink, if you're not aware, are Cricut brand pens or ink transfer sheets that are heat transfer material to create crack and waterproof designs. It's essentially a sublimation ink where the ink changes from a solid to a gas that bonds with polyester fibers. The polymers and polyester are the recommended material for the sublimation onto fabric, but infusible ink, sublimation ink can be used on hard goods, think coasters, phone cases, etc. as well. Any questions about pens or markers?
None at this time.
It's a little science thrown in there. The last thing I'll mention on that is if you are looking at sublimation or wanting to do t-shirts and you do look at infusible ink, they will not work on cotton, 100% cotton. You do want to make sure that you are using a polyester blend. And that's, again, because of that science that I mentioned. If you do use cotton, it will wash out, and that would be sad. So you're moving on, foil transfer tool. So this is a really cool kit that you can purchase for the Cricut Maker. And it is used with craft foil transfer sheets to add foil embossing to a variety of materials. It does come with 3 interchangeable tips, fine, medium, and bold. And it's really great for simple outlines, calligraphy effects, or more intricate designs. So if you wanted to make your own wedding card, wedding invitations, you could totally do that and jazz it up with the foil transfer tool. It's pretty nifty. All right, any other questions about these machine accessories before I jump into other accessories?
Not at this time.
Cool. All right. So some other accessories I would say are not required to purchase the Cricut brand, but are useful for your overall crafting, project crafting. So scissors are used for cutting excess material or cutting things down. In general, vinyl paper comes in a 12 by 12 size. If you're cutting something out that's a 2 by 4, then you don't want to waste all of that material. You want to be able to save it and use it for another project. So you can actually just have those on hand and cut your material down to size. Next, there is a weeder. And It is this tool here at the top that looks sort of like a dental tool. And it's the only one of these that I would say I highly recommend getting because it makes weeding so much easier. So weeding, whenever I say weeding for crafting with a Cricut, means to pull off extra material around a design to expose those fine details. So if you are working with vinyl, for instance, weeding is essential to that because anything you are cutting out, you are going to have excess material around it. And that's regardless if it's a permanent vinyl decal that you're sticking onto something, or if it is an iron-on vinyl for a t-shirt or apron, whatever. You need to be able to pull off the rest so that you can then adhere it to whatever you are working on. Same with tweezers. It's used in crafting and weeding. It's just very useful to be able to pick up slivers of whatever you're creating and use that to apply elsewhere. Next, we have a scraper, which is this square tool here. And it is very useful to get small air bubbles out from material laid out onto your cutting mat to get a flat cut. So from experience, I will tell you when you are putting material down on those cutting mats, sometimes you end up with little bubbles underneath. And that's not great for your cut because you want it to be as flat as possible so you don't end up with something askew. And next you have this tiny, very cute mini spatula. And that's just to help lift your material off of the mat. So again, I mentioned earlier, it's really sad when you pull things off and they tear. This can help you not tear anything. But again, you don't have to get the Cricut model to do that. It is also useful to have a ruler simply to measure out designs or ensure a straight edge in design placement. So before and after, whatever works. And painter's tape, not pictured here. Painter's tape is really useful providing extra support during cutting to ensure material doesn't move. What you do not want to have happen is to have your material displace while you're cutting. So putting down painter's tape, which is meant to be removable, is just a good safeguard, and it's a good practice to have in place because as sticky as those mats are, they do lessen in stickiness over time. And it's just a useful thing to have on hand. It's the same thing with heat resistant tape. If you're doing anything that's iron-on or infusible, you want to make sure that it's not going to move while you're applying it because it would be really, really sad to have your design placed and put the iron down on top and then realize after you've got it already fused to your material that it's crooked. So definitely using tools and accessories ahead of time to prepare will help you overall. And now everyone's favorite part, materials. So this is just a very, very small amount of different kinds of material that these machines can cut. Paper, vinyl, fabric, foil, wood, as long as it's less than 3 millimeters in thickness, leather, chipboard, and so much more. Are there any specific questions about material or pairing materials with different blades or tools for cutting or potential uses? I'll give y'all a minute to type those in or share those. So this picture on this screen is also something that I have made with my Cricut machine. It was made out of a thin cardstock. So the world's your oyster. There's a lot of different things you can make with this machine. Any questions?
None at this time.
Okie doke, no problem. If you have any that just pop up, feel free to let us know. So finally, what are some different project ideas that you can work on with this machine? So I've mentioned some of these throughout this presentation, but you can create t-shirt designs, you can create different greeting cards, party decor, wall decor, cake toppers, lampshades, jewelry, and more. Really, the sky's the limit with what you can make with this machine. There's a lot of different things you can do. Whatever niche you're looking at, there's definitely a way. This is all about ways to take anything that's vector-based or anything that starts flat but turns into a 3D creation, like with these pictures over here. Just a lot of different fun projects. So some additional resources, definitely I recommend checking out the Cricut Learn main website, or Hey, Let's Make Stuff is a great blog about the Cricut. And Jennifer Maker does almost exclusively Cricut content. So if you're looking to learn more about the Cricut or just find that reading is a better way for you to retain information, I highly recommend checking those resources out. And of course, if you just want to revisit anything that we've talked about in today's class, you can revisit our Plano Public Library YouTube channel, where a recording of this class will be uploaded. And before we do all leave, I do want to share just some upcoming program dates that we have. We do have Cricut Design Space Basics on June 29th at 3 p.m. It is also virtual. And then we have a Design to Sell class, which will be all about how do you craft or design something to sell. And that will be July 13th at 3 p.m. and it's virtual. We will have a time management workshop on July 13th at 3 p.m. as well at Harrington Library. We will have a Canva workshop series, and those are virtual on these dates, this July 7th, 14th, 21st, 28th, again at 3 p.m. We will have a Photoshop product photography class on July 27th at 3 p.m. and it's virtual. An Illustrator customizing fonts class on August 11th at 3 p.m. And we will also have a Platforms to Sell class on August 10th at 3 p.m. Are there any questions about today's content? Anything you just want to discuss or throw out or brainstorm? Anything about the Cricut that you still have a question about?
No questions at this time.
Not a problem. Well, thank you everyone. I really appreciate y'all attending today's class. We'll stay on just to take any questions that anyone has last minute. But otherwise, this will conclude today's program. So before we go, I'd like to share a few library resources with you. If you have a short question that you'd like a library staff member to answer, you can actually submit it online at any time using our Ask a Librarian service. A librarian will usually respond within 48 hours with the information you need. If you would like one-on-one help from one of our librarians, which is usually about 30 minutes, and the chance to go over a specific question, you can book a librarian request online, and each session is tailored to your specific needs and is compatible with your schedule. For many of the topics we covered today, you can find additional tutorials on YouTube and resources online as well, as I mentioned. And a recording of today's class will be available in a few days on our Plano Public Library YouTube channel. As you exit today's program, please take a moment to complete our program survey, which should pop up as you exit. This really does help us out to create more program content of interest to you. You can also share what went well or what you didn't like. So thank you very much. We really do value your feedback. And thank you again for joining us today. All right.